You have found the Shanty Pants Show.
I'm
Uh,
going to scoot a little bit. I'm going to move because I think that they're forgot that I'm
don't.
sitting in a wheelchair. It's all good.
Yes. Oh my
I just wanted
gosh.
lighting.
Oh my gosh. Okay, sit down.
There we go.
Making me
There
nervous
we go.
there. So excited to have you here, and I'm so excited to share your story with the world. You have so much to share with us. So, first of all, why don't you start with letting us know who you are?
Well, first of all, Shannon, I just want to thank you for having me on this podcast. It's a great honor. My name is Kayla Cotton, and I'm 25 years old. Um, right now, I have just recently gone on to hospice, so I don't know how much more detail I should go in right now, but I'll leave it there for this moment.
Perfect, perfect. Well, let's start a little bit further back. Let's start kind of
Absolutely.
in your past. And I know we have a little bit in common there. We grew up in the same type of environment, but in different states. So we have never met in person, but our dads
I
are
mean, have we?
friends.
Have we in camp?
There is a chance that we have crossed paths.
Just
I
because of
don't
all the camps?
Right. I feel like I don't know. There is that chance. We probably should figure that out
We
because that
should.
would be kind of cool
It would be.
if we had proof of that. But I do know
Aren't
that our
you? Aren't
dads are friends. Oh, so we do need to figure that out though. That would
we
I
do.
There is a chance that our paths have crossed. Our
That would
age
be
difference is
interesting.
pretty big, but our dads are friends. So I do know that much and they've stayed connected
And
and
we've gone to your dad's house and stuff and had dinner before and everything.
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So maybe we have met.
I
That
mean,
is
it's probably just
crazy.
yeah, it is. That is.
Yeah, it
That
is so
is.
crazy. It's amazing. I wish we could meet right now.
I know, me
Uh,
too.
I just wanna give you a big hug. But
Same,
why don't you
same.
talk a little bit about growing up and kind of what your childhood looked like, from your point of view?
Yeah. So, I was in the, I was in the East Coast side of the Colt, which included mainly Virginia, all up in Virginia, Northern Virginia, Fredericksburg, Charlottesville, Richmond, and a few small areas in between, and it accumulated at its peak to about 350 to 400 people. So life for me growing up was I didn't have any outside friends growing up. I was occasionally allowed to interact with my neighbors, but it was very very controlled, and it was always reminding there of the world. You can't be with them. You can't be with them. I'll get water.
Yeah, you're good.
Um, so it was always anybody I did have access to. It wasn't really acceptable for me to be close or to be friends with them. And I was homeschooled, and as a woman, education was not something that was valued very highly. So for my brothers, getting their high school or GED was like they needed to do that because they needed to be providers and workers, and they started working, at 16 and getting their in college at 17, and it was like a big thing for them. But for me, it was like I was raised to be a wife and mother, to have children. That was my purpose in life. And so I didn't really get that great of an education. There wasn't, um, so by the time that after I was sick for a while and I did go to school, so this would have been my 10th grade year. I tested into school and I tested in at a math grade level about third or fourth grade.
Wow.
I was supposed to be a junior in high school at this point in time. And so my reading comprehension was pretty good because mainly my schoolwork was just reading books. It wasn't really learning concepts. So within those 3 years at school, I felt like I pretty much had to catch up on everything that in 3 years. And the first year was a big struggle, but I finally got through it and I graduated with a 3.9 GPA. So I was very
Wow.
proud of myself.
That's awesome.
Proud of myself, not just because of getting a good grade, but because of knowing how hard it, how much work it took to get there, and how valuable it was for me to get that diploma and say, yes, I worked for my education, and then to be able to go to college, and be the first person I believe in anybody in any of the in any of the assembly, any of the cult groups that
Mhm.
would. I believe I was the first person to go off to college in any of them.
Wow.
So as a girl, go stay in a
Right.
dorm, and at least in
Wow.
my Virginia area and the Texas area,
Mhm.
I didn't know of anyone who was doing that. So my family was very scared at first because, we had been isolated from the world.
Right.
Um, but so growing up, I got to that point of overcoming, but growing up was very isolated. I struggled with interacting with people. I was very shy. I struggled with speech issues. I have multiple learning disabilities, which I didn't know till I got older. I have like 8 learning disabilities and different speech things. But we didn't know that till I got older. And ADHD and all that, of course.
Right.
And so I was very isolated as a kid, and I really struggled fitting into the group because you had 4 peers that you had to get along with, and that was the
Yeah.
only kids you had interaction with
Right.
multiple times a week, and I just did nothing made sense to me. Nothing in this group
Mhm.
made sense to me, so I just spent hours and hours of time on my alone, and I through years of therapy, I've said that it was great for me because I spiritually connected in a way that I don't think I would have if I
Mhm.
hadn't been in such like abyss of just nothing and no purpose feeling.
Right.
But I also say that I feel like it very much damaged me, my ability to like social cues. It took me a very long time to just figure out very basic social things because really up until I was 15, I was very isolated from the
Mm.
world.
Yeah.
And this is not just like isolated from, I mean, we're talking no TV, no radio, nothing, no outside influence whatsoever. The only thing I had was a newspaper and I would check basketball scores in.
Oh.
That's the kind of isolated it was.
Right.
Obviously, I have my dad and my brothers that were great, but, as if you look at any development, it's not healthy for a kid to have that.
Right.
I also remember, the isolation part as a child didn't strike me as weird. I thought the world was scary. Um, I was terrified to go out ever because people always made fun or were really stared, and I always felt really embarrassed about how we dressed. I felt it from the time I was young. But I felt like because I was born into this, I was born into like a higher entity.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so I could never go back and like be world people. Like I wanted to be world people, but I was like, I was already born into this, so I don't have a choice. I have to wear these clothes. I can't cut my hair. I have to adhere to these rules because quote unquote it's more holy and more godly.
Yep. Yep.
Um and so I felt that very, very young. I felt that
Mhm.
shame about my body, and that was something that grew in me, for a long time. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was kind of just a little bit. As you know, it's
Right.
hard to condense,
Yeah. It's a
um
lot. A lot of trauma
yeah,
and
for sure,
story
for
there.
sure, for
Now
sure.
let's take a step back too and talk a bit about this disease that you were born with and kind of how that affected your childhood as well and how that
Yeah.
progressed.
So I was born with mitochondrial disease, but we did not know that at first I had it. I was born healthy. The only thing I had wrong was a slight biotin deficiency, and that was it. And as I grew up, I was pretty much very healthy, active, super active, loved to be active, as somewhat of having influence of 4 older brothers. I wanted to compete all the time. But we started to know, I would say as a kid, the first thing that stood out to me but didn't ring a bell was the fact that I injured very easily. My joints would injure and were very like it would always be like a joke with my friends, like floppy wrist and floppy hands, and we'd always like you can do all these tricks, and like it was like a joke. And I always kind of noticed it, but I guess I was like, I guess it's just one of those more injury prone people. Um, and then as I started hitting puberty, which is this is common with some genetic diseases, which is where more stressors happen. My body started becoming symptomatic within about,
Mm,
within about a year, it started becoming symptomatic. So I started passing out. I started getting extremely fatigued over things that I normally didn't at all. Things that I could do, I was having to lay down a lot more, but still mild enough. Like I went to the doctor and they were like, nothing's, super wrong. So I was like, okay, I'll just deal with it. And then in 2011, December of 2011, there was a really bad norovirus going around.
mm.
And
How
my
old were
entire
you at this
family,
time? How old were
I,
you at this
I
time?
was 14.
Okay.
So I'd been having mild symptoms. We had done some trying to figure out what was going on, but had been like, I'm still kid, growing pains, you know. Um, and so I was 14 and I got the norovirus, got it very bad. I mean, sick 30 times in a night. Just one of those ones like you have nightmares about getting,
Mm,
those
ugh,
sicknesses. Um, and I never recovered. I
mm,
never recovered. So, some people in my family started noting, like, the past couple months, you've looked really pale, like, you seem to lose weight. They noticed it, and then in the spring, it got so much worse. I started thinking I have an ulcer. I realized I've lost 30 pounds, and I was never been big. Um, and all of a sudden, I'm going, and all of a sudden, it turns from not sure what's going on to I haven't even taken food for a month at
mm.
all.
Wow.
And so through I would say about an 8-month process of testing, treatments, and all of that, we kind of finally figured out I had mitochondrial disease, Ehlers-Danlos, and gastroparesis, which was the main things that were making me so sick. I went into kidney failure several times as a teenager as well.
Mm,
And it was just kind of one thing after another. But the ironic part about all of this is that, um, being at the hospital, because we were such an isolated group, we never did, I mean, not a single thing was done outside of the group. Not an interaction with another person, not an activity, not nothing, nothing. You didn't go out to a baseball game with your family. So being in the hospital was like the most in the world really any of our family had ever been.
wow. Yeah.
And it was within weeks we were already becoming so transformed because we were sitting there saying like our whole lives we had been told only we're the only Christians basically.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you have a nurse who comes in at night when you're crying in pain and my dad's sitting there like how can we help her, my 15-year-old daughter, and she just sits down and kneels down and prays next to your bed, and then just and you all of a sudden you realize all this stuff we were taught is just ups that's not right.
Right.
And
Mm,
after months of that, we started getting to a point where it was like we don't really miss camp. We don't really miss meetings. Like when I be in the hospital, like I feel like we're having a better time in the hospital than we are actually at meeting. Like
right.
I
Oh,
feel like it's like you know, and so just like slowly over time, I remember having this moment. I remember it was like July of 2012. I can distinctly remember it. 2012, getting sick was just a turning point in my life because, like I said, it started taking me away from the cult. And I had this clear and distinct realization that my favorite nurse, I loved her to death, still to this day, love her to death, Katie Hughes, um, that because she had short hair, she was not evil and going to hell, and I
oh,
could be
wow.
friends with her.
Wow.
This was a clear realization at 15. At 15, just to tell you how deep seated the brainwashing was, that
Right.
in my mind, I thought that if someone cut their hair, I couldn't even be friends or speak with them.
Absolutely.
And, like, that once I realized that, then everything else started to crumble. And
Wow.
within a year, I started going to, school, and I told my dad, I said, "We either completely change or I'm done with it. Once I'm 18, like, I'm going somewhere else," because and then he came along beside me, ended up being marked, and we ended up kinda going through it together, but there's
Wow.
no doubt in my mind that being sick, was the reason why we were able to be out of the cult, and it had a profound effect because my dad leaving, my brothers left, my uncles and aunts left. It really
Wow.
started a huge chain and then into California, so it just kind of
Yep.
destabilized teach my dad through this because of what he saw in the hospital. He would speak about it. He would speak about, like, there's a Amish person who's encouraging me. There's a Muslim person who's encouraging me. There's a Baptist and a Methodist that are encouraging me. There
Right.
are different races, different backgrounds, and it's like, it doesn't
Right.
matter. Love
Yep.
knows no boundaries. And
Yep.
so he challenged the head of the he
Mhm.
challenged the head men, and it destabilized it because no one expected that he would. But he followed what he believed, his spirit was telling him, and it destabilized it. And so
Ugh,
I don't take credit for it, and neither would he, but I
right.
definitely think that it was used as a
Absolutely.
tool to
We all
just
should be
kind
thanking him.
right, like, just the infrastructure. I mean, for him to I think about the time when he went in front of, 300 plus people in Charlottesville and, said, "Hey, I'm done. This is wrong.
That's so
This is
commendable.
wrong,"
Yeah.
in front of his best friends, in front of people
Uh,
that he had known his whole life, and he said,
yeah,
"I don't care what happens to me, I don't care what consequences happen, I have to speak the truth," walked off and got marked right then, got
of course.
excommunicated right then.
Yep, yep. Wow.
Um, so we don't take credit for it, but yes, God
Right.
used that, the Spirit used that, the universe
Absolutely.
used that, and I think that
Absolutely.
if that didn't happen, I think that there would be a lot of structures much more in place because as I can recall, an upper level talks.
Leadership, yeah.
Yeah, upper leadership, there was talks of, a compound in
Mhm.
Oklahoma and, living together, and we were heading in that direction. I mean,
Mhm.
that's how extreme this was.
Right.
Sometimes I put that in there to illustrate, like, how extreme.
It's progressing. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and it was getting worse.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's a lot on
Wow.
that.
Yes, but that is amazing, and so with your hospital stay, obviously that, started some huge changes for your family, and your health at that point, you're about 14 when it really went downhill, and you're 25 now. You've never really been, truly healthy since then. You've just kind of been fighting this disease and doing what you can.
Yeah.
Okay.
So since I began getting sick, I've had 35 surgeries in these past 10 years. I have had I mean, I can't even list to you all the amount of times I've had organ failures. Um, time I mean, literally doctors rushing in saying, "Hey, we might have to pull out half your intestine." Other times saying, "Hey, we might have to go on brain surgery. You might not make it through." I mean, just stuff that just all kinds of stuff. But even more than that, even more than those moments, it's been the day in, day out. Like, I've had a feeding tube, I've had a port, I access it, I spend hours a week, and for the past 10 years, I've spent hours a week doing IV treatments and tube treatments that I take care of myself, and I taught them
Oh,
how to do
wow.
it because I wanted to go to school, I wanted to be independent.
Wow.
And I think the thing that, became it wore took a toll on my body was that I did it all. I did it
Yeah.
all, and I did it every day, and, if you look at the past 10 years, I've made less than 5 major mistakes, and
Hmm.
they were major, but, like, for every day for 10 years,
Wow.
since starting hospice, I've kind of been able to grasp the exhaustion
I
of
bet.
of of being in pain every day.
Mm. Yeah.
And it's making me a little bit emotional now
I
because
bet.
I'm still processing that,
Right.
of not having to I have to take my comfort meds, but, like, it's not misery, like, it's not like, "Okay, now I have to access my port, I've gotta this is a 45-minute process, and if I don't, then I can just wake up and just live and be
Wow.
comfortable, and maybe I'm kinda groggy and sleepy." But,
Right.
yeah,
Wow.
I think it's been such a fight, and it's been one that I've in my heart, I've said continue fighting because this is gonna lead to something bigger, and I didn't know what it was, but as I made this decision, it was so clear when we made it, me and my family made it.
Oh.
Um, and to some degree, I'm like, this 10-year battle, it was for this to show people and to be able to talk about the 10-year battle
Mhm. Right,
and talk about
right,
how I got through that.
right,
Because I can't tell you how many times I should have died during that. I mean, at least once a
right.
year through that time. At
Ugh,
least once a year was like, you could have died for sure.
wow. And
Um,
you working through that and taking care of yourself to become so independent, that in turn gave you some opportunities, right, to go to college?
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
so that's
Yes.
exciting,
So
like
I
you
got to
said.
go to college and be a part of the basketball team for 2 years.
Wow.
It was the most fun I'd had in my life, like,
Mm.
just being a college student, nobody really knew I was sick, I kinda just kept it under I did everything at night. Um, People were always like, "What? You're sick?" Like, I'm like, "Yeah, I kind of rely on IV and feeding, like, I don't really eat that much, and I can have seizures and and you're like, "What?" But, but it was such a I was a kid, I got to be a kid
Yeah.
for a while, and it was, one of my better stretches of health, but I was passing out a lot, so it was, like,
Mm.
better, but, it ended very abruptly on one night, um, and I'm good.
I know.
Uh, it's always the hardest one to get through.
Yeah, I bet, I bet. You just take your time.
Um, One night I came home, and I'm not gonna go into all the details, but I'll just give an overview for the
Mhm.
story. Um, One night I came home, and, my housemate, who I was good friends with, I was housemates with 2 guy friends, they were both lawyers, really, really good friends, really great housemates, everything. One of them had invited a friend over, I had never met that friend before. Um 4 weeks before, I had been in the hospital fighting sepsis, which is a bloodstream infection, and I had for about 24-hour period, I had about a 40% chance of surviving. I was really bad off. I was still recovering and still doing IV treatments through this when I at this night. We hung around in the kitchen, whatever, and I took my treatments and went upstairs. He actually recognized I had a PICC line. He actually said, "Why do you have a PICC line?" And I said, "Just for medical stuff." And I went upstairs, I did my medical stuff, and I went to bed. Now, during that time, I was hooked up to 3 medical things. I had an IV pole, I had a backpack, so I had 3 medical lines coming out of me. And that night, that man decided to break into my room and, um, assault me. And, the only thing I could do was, and I apologize, this is gonna I'm gonna put a trigger warning for this just for any survivors. Um I could only plead for him to stop, but I could do nothing because I was tied up in cords. So I had no ability to fight, which
Mm.
was, the worst feeling in the world.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and basically what happened with this was I was 3 weeks away from getting off of my 2 of my IV treatments. I was on
Mm.
the swing up. We were about to celebrate it with me and my doctors, and I immediately had to move. I left for Texas, and I ended up, just everything went wrong at the everything went wrong at the right time.
Mm.
So I went to Texas for a while, came back, ended up in the streets, ended up in a homeless shelter, ended up in just bad places, not knowing who I was anymore.
Mm.
Feeling no control over anything, feeling like nothing mattered. It was just all a gray
Mm.
space, and I felt like my life was ruined. I felt like I had had this purpose, and I had had this thing building up, and then this one guy just couldn't leave me alone for one night, and so it took me a long time
Mm.
to find myself again in that, and it's a lifelong process.
Mm.
But I had
Yeah.
to after that event, after going through court, after the media, after the still ongoing stuff, I had to find myself again.
Mm.
And I had to find my wholeness and my value in my deservingness of you don't deserve ever to be treated or touched or harmed in
Mhm.
any way
Right.
by
Good.
anyone under
Yep.
any circumstances.
Right.
And it's just been years of therapy, of support,
Mm.
of doing that day in and day and out. You did not
Mhm.
deserve this.
Right.
You did not fail at life because of this. He did not cause your life to fail. He
Mm.
caused pain, but pain and happiness are somewhat in one. You just gotta
Right.
see it that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
And so that's when I started. So one of the things, the results of that is it took a big hit on me physically. I
Mhm.
took a really big hit on me physically. I wasn't able to come off the TPN in the month.
Mm.
I had to come off of TPN, which was one of the treatments I was on for my IV a year and a half later.
Ugh.
And that year and a half later cost me my liver and my kidneys.
Mm.
So
Oh
I
my
could no
gosh.
longer do TPN and I could no longer do feedings, only small amount of feedings. And that's what I've been doing the past 2 years. And I have just gotten to a point where I've
Wow.
lost so much weight. It's very miserable for me to just try to live.
Right.
Um, and I have my body is literally whack. Like I'm full on
Yeah.
lactating right now. My body
Ugh.
doesn't know what's going on. Like, I have to
Wow.
pump right now.
Oh
Even my
my
doctors are like,
gosh.
"This is really weird," but they said it was from a malnutrition imbalance.
Oh, wow.
That's just, like, all over the place.
Wow. Wow.
And so that event took away, let me not say took away, but it altered my timeline here on Earth.
Right. Right.
Um, and in one hand, it makes me so angry, I wish I could yell that to his face, I wish,
Mhm.
and on the other hand, I have to see the blessing of being able to live a short life and being able blessing of being able to enjoy everything in the moment when you're 25 instead of when you're 85,
Right.
and the blessing of being able to be an advocate and do advocacy work and to speak to
Yes.
hundreds and hundreds and thousands of
Right.
survivors
Yes.
and work on policy change and whatever it may
Mhm.
be. And so those 2 things exist in one thing. It doesn't, they're not separate, just as
Yeah.
grief, I mean, it's all these things,
Right.
like, grief cannot exist without love. Yes.
It's amazing that you have taken the time and you're, an awful situation and you've
Uh-huh.
used it to really help others and be a voice for maybe many that weren't willing to speak out. So speak a little bit about that and some of the opportunities that you had during that time.
Well, first off, this is my favorite part of after telling that part of the story. I love getting to this part because there's
Good.
so much good on this.
Right.
But I first wanna take you back a little bit back to let's take us back to when I was 15 in the hospital. And
Mhm.
I remember there was a moment with a nurse, and that moment told me what my purpose was. And it was a
Mm.
moment where there was a kid in the room right next behind me. He was 8 years old, and I believe he had cystic fibrosis.
Mm.
And I heard the whole thing. He coded and passed away.
Mm.
Um, he was 8 years old. I heard them doing compressions. I heard them tell the family. I heard it all. And
Mm.
his nurse was also my nurse, and I still remember about an hour later after everything had, come through and they had taken his body away and everything, she came into my room with a smile on her face. I mean,
Mm.
just like a not like a fake smile, like a beaming smile on her face, and was just like, "Hey, I'm sorry. I've been so busy. Is there anything I can do for you?"
Mm.
And I just teared up, and
Mhm.
I was like, "Can I do anything for you?"
Mhm.
Like, you just saw a child die. And you're
Mhm.
asking me, like, I'm sitting up in bed, I'm okay, like, I'm in the hospital, but I'm okay. I'm
Wow.
okay.
Mm.
And you're asking me, you're having the wherewithal to
Mm.
ask me if I'm okay. And I
Wow.
was like, I realized my purpose is to give, and my purpose is to use whatever I'm given in life to
Mm.
spiritually grow, awaken, and therefore help others.
Mm.
And I realized too in those moments, I learned how to recognize when you go through a lot of trauma, you begin to recognize when people are going through trauma, even if they are not
Mhm.
showing it. And
Right.
so I said a prayer during that time that I would be able to fulfill that purpose.
Mm.
And
Wow.
so I had to remember that after this happened
Mm. Absolutely.
because here, well, let's go into the advocacy because
Yes.
here's where that purpose really got fulfilled. Um, a month after the report came out about my situation, it was on the news. Several girls started reaching out.
Mm.
And it started with 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and on down the list. I think we're at like 15 by now, something like that. And one girl actually moved back from Washington State to Virginia to report because she was like, she felt so much guilt because she thought it was her fault that she didn't report for me and she
Mm.
wanted to do something for me. So
Wow.
she moved back out here and she's now my best friend. So that's
Oh
first off. First off,
gosh.
that right there,
Wow.
that was my I always thought I say that that's kind of my proudest moment of advocacy is being able
Wow.
to develop that bond and I mean we've been friends for years now.
Mm.
But a couple things that I wanted so here's a couple things with advocacy. So a few weeks before he was going to plead guilty,
Mm.
we sat down with the prosecutors and I was like, I want to share, but from the beginning, I had been really private about it. I did
Mm.
not want to share this. I was like, I am going to carry this to my grave, and only my close friends are going to know about it. And like, that's the way I felt about it. I started changing as the girls told their stories, and then I said, I sat in the prosecutor's office, and was like, give me some insight into this. And I can still remember him getting teared up, and he said, first off, I want you to know that 7 years, it devastates me that he only is spending 7 years in that
Mm.
place. Um, and he said, secondly, he said, "You have already your determination, your fight, even without saying anything. You've been a leader. You've been a voice, even while you haven't been allowed to say anything." And so he said, "You have the choice to speak or not speak." But he said, "I can tell you for sure, you would impact more lives than you could ever know
Mm.
if you decide to speak out."
Wow.
And so I thought about it and I was like, I'm going to. I'm going to do it.
Wow.
I'm going to do it
Wow.
for my sister survivors. And it was not an easy decision. I mean, to be in court when he's pleading guilty and then coming right out and there's a room of 4 reporters and I mean you're just like um but I started that and then it just kept going and eventually one of my goals was to get the 3 original women who spoke out. Uh the 3 original women who spoke out, give them an opportunity to speak and share their story on a platform, like on the
Mm.
news, on a big social media platform. Haven't been able to do it with one of them because her trial's still pending.
Okay.
But with 2 of them, I worked for 10 months I worked for 3 months tracking down a news, or a reporter that would cover the story.
Okay.
And after 3 months, I got a hold of, Marissa at USA Today, who covered the Larry Nassar situation.
Mm.
She responded back immediately and said, "When can I come out?"
Wow.
We worked 10 months together on investigating him and the cheer gyms that he was involved with.
Mm.
And in January, about a year ago, we had our first meetup, and it was the first time all of us survivors were in the same room. And it was the first time that 2 of the 3 that I wanted to I promised them. I promised them because their cases didn't move forward, so I promised them they would get a
Mm.
voice. So when I sat there and they were interviewing them, I was just bawling because I
Oh
was like,
gosh, I bet. Oh.
I didn't know it would happen, especially with my pain and dealing with my stuff, and I was like, I actually made it happen. And then when it got released, it ended up being front page of USA Today.
Wow. Wow.
And their faces were put on the front page of USA Today, and there was nothing I've fulfilled greater than that. I have helped pass legislation. I work in Virginia Capitol state legislation, helping advocate for bills that help survivors. And but that moment was like
That is amazing.
being able to give that to them
Yes.
because they didn't get justice. And
Mm,
I always want to give more to them, but at least a voice.
yeah,
And so the grounding of my advocacy is raising awareness, educating, but also empowering.
yeah,
My goal as an advocate is not to get a louder voice.
mm,
It's to spread my voice to other people. It's to share my voice. I
I
hope
love
that when
that.
people are around me, they don't just feel compelled by my story, they feel compelled to share their story.
Oh,
And
I
that's
love that.
really what I have the goal. That's why I share my story. For a
Mm,
while, I felt like it was really selfish to talk about it and just talk about me, and I
yeah,
had to look at the bigger picture. I had to step out of my humanity and look at my
yep,
spirit and say, "This is bigger than me."
right.
You had to put your words out there, and you let the world, you let universe, God handle it from
Yes,
there.
yes,
And it may impact one person, and if it impacts one person, it's worth it.
absolutely. That's always my philosophy too. For me, it's more, speaking out on other things and bringing humor to the world.
Yeah,
But
and
I
I
always
love
say
bringing
that.
humor
It's
too.
like, yes, and you
I
do.
live it.
You're so you are going through this moment right now in life with humor, and it blows my mind when I see your TikToks and your fun videos, and I'm just like, "Wait, she's on hospice? Like,
Yeah,
does she
I
know what
would
that
love.
means?" Does she fully understand? But you do, and I just think,
Mhm.
what a light
That's
that
what makes it so free.
yes, and I know you like you've told me in a different time that, you're pain-free for the first time in your life. So you're just enjoying these moments. You know
I
your
get
days are
emotional.
limited.
I get
Yeah,
emotional like 10 times a day just
I
realizing I'm not
bet.
in pain. I'm like, "I'm not in pain."
That's amazing. Oh,
Like,
I
it yeah.
I I can't even
Like, I
imagine.
don't remember I don't remember what it was like to not be in pain.
Uh,
Going back to the humor thing really quick,
yes,
I
yes.
love humor. Humor, I'm very, focused and intense, and I'm very passionate about, creating change and being an advocate and being that
Mhm.
too. But humor is my break from that because I
Yes,
can't be like that all the time,
I
and
see
I
that.
joke about anything. I
I
joke about
love that.
anything.
I've seen you talk with your family and your dad, and to see that it's acceptance of what is. And actually, I had that question. How did you know your whole life or majority of your life that your life expectancy was different than than most?
Yes.
Okay.
Um, I wasn't expected to make it through I wasn't expected to graduate high school.
Okay.
I was I was super sick in my 14, 15, 16, 17 years, like,
Okay.
just I they really didn't think I mean, they really did not think I was gonna pull through.
Okay.
And I fought through. I fought like
That's
hell to
amazing.
get through that.
That is amazing.
And, I never thought that I would ever be free from it, and I
Mm,
always had a sense in my life they doctors from after I kind of overcame everything, they stopped telling me time frames, and
mm.
they would tell me stuff is serious, like, they would say, like I would ask, like, "So how am I on the malnutrition scale?" And they're um, like, the worst of all our patients," and I would just be like, "Oh, right, okay."
Oh,
And they'd be
wow.
like you've always been," like, you're
Yeah.
like
You're like,
and
"I
they would
win.
right? I'm
I'm
like, "I
the
won the
worst."
competition, do I get a star?" I just don't
Oh
need
my
a S.
gosh.
I'd be like, "Do
Wow.
I get a star?"
Yeah.
And so they would say stuff like that, like, they would
Mm,
be like, I mean, well, like, half your kidneys are, like, not working. I mean, they would be but they kinda were with me, like, "What are we gonna
right,
do about it?"
right.
So they never would really tell me, like, "Oh, this," but I always knew. I knew, and I would say over the past year, this sense has gotten stronger that it's coming.
Okay,
My
okay.
body has started to lose I would say over the past year, I've been living a little bit harder in life, like,
Mm,
trying to live a little fuller, pushing myself
mhm.
more because I knew I got news of June of last year from my neurologist that I could start losing, if that you heard a sound, I have a squishy ball, by the way,
Oh,
and I
yeah.
just
That's
realized
good.
it could
No,
make a
it I
weird
can't hear it. It's fine.
we okay, good.
You're good.
I
Yeah.
just like that could be weird sounds in the background. I had a neurology doctor tell me in June that I'm developing neuropathy and that within the
Mm,
next year or 2, I may lose all feeling in my legs. So
mm,
I was already mentally preparing, like, last summer, I was, like, trying to do a lot of different stuff because I knew if I wasn't going to die really soon, I was going to start losing some big mobile, either neurological, real mobile things that are big, big chunks of my life.
right.
And so I've been mentally preparing, and then as it's gotten closer, I literally journaled in January. I said, I think my body's getting close. I said, I just
Mm,
feel it in my spirit. I'm getting to where I am getting out of my human body more and more, just slightly.
wow.
Like it's just
Wow.
slightly, like I can just touch other things from and it's not something I can see, but I can just feel it. Like I
Okay.
feel, like I'm touching the other side, but it's just kind of like you're near. And so
Yeah.
but at the same time, it's like it's there, but it's also telling me, like, "This is your, like, last chapter, like, soak this
Mhm.
chapter up." Like,
Wow.
um, I tell people, I'll talk about heaven, I'll talk about all that stuff if it comforts you, but for
Mhm.
me, I'm at peace with all of that, and I just wanna have fun right now.
That's
If
great.
you wanna talk
Yeah.
about it and it's like a comfort for you, then that's totally fine.
Right.
But for me, I really am at peace. I get to be I mean, this will make me emotional again because, there's a quote that said, uh, "It's no big deal. I'm not going anywhere. I'm just dropping my body."
Yeah.
Like,
Wow.
I'm just dropping my body, but my spirit's still around.
Yeah. Wow.
Um, and I
Mm,
thought about how my body, even though I was not as sick as a kid, I've never had a fully healthy body.
right. Right.
And my but then this body which has been just a shell, it's just a
Yeah.
shell. This
Yeah.
is that's why I'm not scared because this is
Mm,
just a shell. Like, whatever
wow.
you believe,
Right.
your spirit exists within you, and you're
Mhm.
this is gonna go away.
Yeah.
And so I'm not attached to this. I'm
Wow.
appreciative of it because it's given me 25 years, but I'm not
Right.
attached to it.
Right.
Um,
Ugh.
but just thinking of my body will be like I just think of when I take that last breath, like my body will finally be at rest. It'll finally be
Yeah.
safe. It'll finally
Right.
not be wondering, am I about to die? Am I about to be assaulted?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it's finally
Right.
just gonna be
Peace.
at rest, and that's such a
Yeah.
comforting thing in my soul. So
Oh,
every
good.
moment of this,
Good.
there's a lot of grief, but
I
so
bet.
much
Yeah.
of it is joy. It's like
Yes. Mm,
even when you are grieving, it's like happy tears because it's because of what you have. It's not
right.
because yeah.
Right.
So yeah.
But, I just commend you for that spirit though too, because this isn't the norm, I would say, for someone that is on
Yeah.
hospice, and, so it's so neat, I think, for you to share this experience in your last days with the world, and I see it in your TikTok videos and how you're speaking out, you're making it be a less scary thing, I think, probably for a lot of people out there, whether it's that they're near
They've
that point in their
experienced it.
life or they have family members, because I think it's a very scary end of our life type thing. So
It's
you're
one of those
bringing a neat.
topics I've found a niche in talking about topics nobody wants to talk about.
Yeah,
If
absolutely.
we think about, like, sexual assault and death,
Yeah, right. You're like, "I
we're
got
not
it."
I'm like, "Yeah, man, that's about, let's say, child sexual abuse and, like, death."
Right.
Like, let's talk about the 2 last things on the earth that anybody wants to talk about, and
Right.
yet I'm the craziest, silliest person
Right.
on the face of the earth,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you have to be.
Yeah,
Um,
and you wouldn't
and
be the
one
place
thing
you're at without choosing
yeah,
to
and
to be that.
one thing I wanna add too about you were saying about my spirit is there was a little bit of conflict, but it wasn't real conflict. It was definitely like a gnat conflict. It was like a voice that was
Mhm.
trying to be negative, and it was like, "But what people think of you if
Mm,
you don't look like you're in hospice? But will people have compassion on you? Will people even care if you don't look sick? Well, if you are happy and living life, and
right.
is anybody, like all people think you're faking it. Like, what if people don't take
Mhm.
you serious? Like, all those different things that will go through your head of like, people are gonna think you're over exaggerating, and then just
Right.
the endless loop. And I just had to just say, I said it in a video, I actually clipped it and
I saw that.
I clipped it and put it on a reel of just saying, "Those people's opinions are not gonna be with me when I take my last breath."
Right, right. So
And
you
I had to
do
leave
you.
I
Yeah.
had to leave it at that.
Yes. And you're doing this in such an amazing way. And you don't know,
I don't
you know,
even know,
what
like, how
tomorrow's
I'm
gonna
doing
be,
it. Yeah,
or what, maybe today's the last day that you're able to sit up and have a conversation with someone, and
exactly,
I
which is
feel
why I
honored,
try.
Yes, and you keep pushing, and so who's anyone else to say how you feel or how you should be acting on hospice? So I think
Exactly.
it's great that you are just being yourself, and again, I think it's bringing again, I've never in my life heard someone talking about the experience of hospice. And so I think it's bringing just this whole new thing to this very unknown thing for a majority of the world.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I
and
just think
I
it's so
think that's
cool.
what I was saying of, like, these 10 years. I think that 'cause I kinda thought I was gonna die as a teenager, and I remember there
Mhm.
was a sense I was like, "No, you're not, but you kinda feel like you are." And as time has gone on, I've kind of gotten this voice that's been like, those 10 years were preparation to be able to talk about these things that no one can talk about. Because if you had
Yeah.
died at 15, you may have
Right.
been able to talk about it to some degree, but in some way, people might have dismissed it because 'cause you're 15. Like,
Right.
whatever it may be, 10 years of experience, 10 years of living through stuff, abuse,
Right.
attacks,
Right.
court, like all these different things. And that will give you the strength to be able to not be like, "Oh my gosh, what do people think of me?" Like, to be
Right.
able to be like, "That's a comment. Don't worry about it." Like, all these years, I feel like have been preparation to still to sit here and talk about this just from my heart, just
Right.
straight open from my heart. And I make it a goal every day to put up a video. And I make it a goal because it's a great goal for me, because if I'm feeling really, really bad, then I can just make a really short video and just say, "Hey, I'm not feeling good." And I
Right.
get something done that day, and
Yes.
that might be the only thing I get done. And then if I am feeling better, then it gives me an opportunity to answer questions and articulate my thoughts. And
Right.
I want to work on a book. And so I'm using this as a way to like answer questions and put together thoughts, and now
Yes.
you can organize like your TikTok. So I'm trying to
Yes.
like, as we talk about, because we have multiple, I have lots of content to
Right.
get
You have all the
into on
subjects.
TikTok.
Yes.
I mean, we
Yes.
have so much. You just see right here, just
I know.
this. I mean, it's like
Right.
so much. So
So
I have
much.
plenty of content to go, but
Yes.
it's been a blessing just in that way of just like having at least one thing a day that I have. That's something I can
Focus
get
on.
done.
Yeah.
Get that
Yes.
done, and at least one thing every couple of days that I'm expressing how I'm feeling. I'm getting that out. And so,
Right.
and then just
Yes.
seeing people have been so positive and
I
so
love it.
giving, and people have been asking to give money. So I finally, I told them, I'm not asking for money, but they gave like $200 or something.
Oh, that's so
Which was
sweet.
very, very kind. Like, and
Yeah.
I was like, trust me, I'm gonna go like buy ice cream for my friends or something with it.
Yes.
Like,
Oh.
I was like, it's not gonna be going to cocaine or anything. I
Yeah.
promise. I promise.
You've already got the
So
good stuff, so,
I have everything I want.
legally.
Legally, like, I call them and they deliver it to me. Fentanyl, Dilaudid, morphine, like,
Well deserved.
anything. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
After
Very well
this
deserved.
fight,
Yeah.
hey, they told me, they said, "From this point on out, you should really never not feel like, you should always feel good." And I was like, "I'm
Oh,
with that."
that's so great.
Alright,
Uh,
I have to go,
you have to
but
go. Yes.
I would love to talk a little more because I have some things I would like to ask you and like to,
Absolutely.
and I just think
Yeah.
there was so much. I'm also on drugs, so I'm also like, "Da da 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 da."
You have found the Shanty Pants Show.